with no microphone, I suspect it'd be easier to preach with a microphone. Today is the second Sunday of our Advent season, and as we know, time is getting busier. I was listening to some people just out in the foyer a few moments ago saying, "You remember that Christmas drink we were going to have? Can we have it in January?" And I suspect there's many of us who are feeling exactly the same kind of way. We're feeling as if things that are happening around us are becoming more of a burden than a blessing. And that's why we've used this Advent season to concentrate on how do we grow an attitude of gratitude in our lives, beginning to look more closely at the good things that happen around us rather than the challenges we face. But it's important that we keep a focus and keep an attention on what's going on. So we suggested there are three ways that we can grow in gratitude. The first is to actually recognise the blessings we have. And that was your homework last weekend, just to take a few moments each day to try to find something for which you would like to give thanks. And hopefully as your week has progressed, it's been much easier to find the things, and in fact your list grows a little bigger each day. The second is to recognise not so much that we have been given blessings, but the giver of the gifts. And that's where we grow in our relationship with God, because when we recognise that God really is the one who gives us these gifts, then there is this understanding, a deeper understanding of how God works in our lives in so many and wonderful ways. And the third is perhaps the most obvious. It's actually just simply to practice gratitude. But we know that there are also obstacles we face. Some of those obstacles are rather large obstacles and can almost cause us to lose hope. And as we heard last weekend, as I told the story of George Bailey from the movie It's a Wonderful Life, when family stresses, when financial stresses started to pour down upon him, it became really quite difficult for him to actually recognise the blessings that he'd received during life. He got so lost in what was going on that he missed completely what God was doing and what God had been doing for him. And it was only later, as he got to an awareness of what happened when the blessings didn't happen, that he suddenly recognised that God had a wonderful plan for him, and God's plan had changed everything. When he became aware of God in his life, then everything changed, and it was so much easier, so much better to live. But the other thing that happens is that we have little problems, things that happen each day that tend to just slow us down a little bit. Things like family and situations that arise in the family where we don't really say that they're a big problem, but they're just there. And how do we deal with it? One of the examples I used last night, and I think it's a fairly good example, is driving to Hobart on the Southern Outlet on a morning and you get stuck in traffic. Do you actually give thanks for the fact you've got a car? Just to see the other side of the story sometimes changes a problem and a challenge from being something that causes anxiety to actually become a blessing. And that's an important part of our life, because blessing sometimes is an aspect of what our faith is about. To see the blessing behind the burden makes life a little bit more easy to live. Today, as we come to the second Sunday of our Advent season, one of the main themes is, of course, the story of John the Baptist calling us to prepare a way for the Lord. And Luke quotes the passage from the prophet Isaiah. There's another part of part of our readings this weekend that I'd like to invite you to reflect on, because they actually take us further into this attitude of gratitude. And it's from our second reading, from the letter of Paul to the Philippians. Paul is writing to the people, and it's about the year 62 AD. He's writing to people in a community that he'd founded several years earlier, but they were a people who were a people of great faith. But at the time Paul is writing, he's actually in prison in Rome and being persecuted. Let's just listen to what he says as he's writing this letter from a place of being persecuted to the people of Philippi. He says, "Every time I pray for all of you, I pray with joy." In the midst of persecution and punishment, What does he do? I pray with joy, remembering how you have helped to spread the good news from the day you first heard it right up to the present. In the midst of everything else that was going on, these people had a joyfulness about living the gospel message that gave hope to others. These people would, I suppose, in many ways have been Paul's closest companions because he had a great love for them. I suspect every priest who's worked in different parishes has a certain group within the parish that he tends to like a bit more than others. Now, don't tell anybody I actually said that. Can you think of somebody in your life that has actually said or done something to help you in your journey? It might be somebody from your childhood, a teacher, a coach, a mentor, somebody who's encouraged you and supported you, and every time you think of them, you think, I'm so blessed to have had that person in my life. Or have we even thought of what that person contributed to us? Or have we just taken it for granted that that was their job without recognising the care and the concern and the love that was behind it? Are there other people in our lives who have been so much a part of our story that in fact they've become background noise rather than up front, and we've taken them for granted? There's lots of things that can happen in our lives, and we can be very blessed by people at different stages. There might even be somebody in your life at this particular moment who is giving you encouragement and support, and for whom we should be really grateful. There are lots of things that we can do in life. There are some people who are very, very special, and because of that gift, make us the better person. Paul goes on a little bit further and he says, he finishes that passage by remembering how you have helped to spread the good news from the day you first heard it right up to the present, which is a reminder to us that there is a sense of, I suppose, two parts to our story. One is the relationships we have, and one is the way in which we work. All of us need relationships. All of us need work. Even when people retire, we do things. We keep being involved in what's going on around us. And because we keep being involved, we have the opportunity to help other people and to grow with them and help them to develop. But it has to be intentional. It's not a case of just wandering through life. One of the great gifts that God has given us, a gift individually to each one of us, is the opportunity to touch people's lives in the way that I can, the way you can. Nobody else can do that. Nobody else has the ability, the opportunity to do the things that you can do in a way that gives life to others. One of my friends, a Canadian by the name of Ron Huntley, has a podcast, and he says at the end of his podcast, if you are still breathing, you have the capacity for life. It's fairly logical, isn't it? But he's really saying life is not just getting up of a morning. Life is being alive, being powerful, being a witness to others. The journey for each one of us is then to say, how does that build gratitude in the lives of others? How do they become comfortable in accepting and acknowledging that God, in a very real way, is it challenging us to be somebody more, somebody better, somebody life-giving? We can be people of love and life, and when we are, we truly make a difference. Towards the end of that prayer, Paul, in a very real way, makes an expression of thanks. He says to them, is that my prayer is that your love for each other may increase more and more. And that's what God asks of us, that our love for those around us and those with whom we work may increase daily, so that they may experience something of what God's love is, because we love them. The only way people can begin to understand what God's love really means is when they experience it from people who give it freely and without need for recognition. But the attitude of gratitude says that as we go along, we should be grateful for the gift that God gives us that allows that to happen. So I'd like to hope that this coming week, you might like to stop and think of the person in your life who has been that gift of love and life to you and for whom you would like to give thanks. You might even like to write them a note. And if you do, don't forget to post it. But to write them a note just to express why you're saying thank you to them. They may never have known what they did for you and what their influence had on your life. But it is really, really good and a sign of our attitude of gratitude when we're able to take a moment to say thank you to someone else who has given us a gift of life and most of all has given us a greater understanding of what it means to be loved by God.